It's part three in our series, in our three-part series on Treasury and risk that UBA UK have organised for this summer. And if you're in the UK, what a glorious summer it's been, or it is continuing to be. And we're going to look at those things on the agenda. This is not only a large field; it's also a very fast-moving field. It's also some 6 months ago we've moved on from that in terms of the power of some of these AI platforms, and 6 months from now it'll moved on again. This is a very fast-moving area. It's moving faster, I think, than many potential users or indeed existing users are able to handle implementation or governance or having some idea on how best to apply this new technology. That's a song by the Red Guitars. Sorry. Anyway, sorry, I digress. That's a band from a long time ago. Now, so we're going to talk about those things on the agenda, and I'm hopefully going to show you some slides, which at the end case study is actually slides from my friend and colleague on the faculty BTRM, Bank Treasury Risk Management, Andrea Kremenina. But we'll get to those at the end. Right, so let us begin. AI is taking all our jobs, all your jobs. Apparently, one or two very well known, very wealthy, theoretically very clever individuals have said this, that they may well be correct. When I first heard that prediction some months ago, quoted by these individuals, I thought, let's think of some jobs that I don't think they'll ever take. And I sat down with my wife, and it took us about 10 minutes, the two of us, to come up with 101 jobs that we don't think AI will ever replace. You can look at that list at your leisure. By the way, I understand that you'll all be receiving these slides, so maybe you could look at that list at your leisure at some point. Sit down with your partner, your other half, your friends, your colleagues, and ask, do you think AI is going to take these jobs? Personally, I think that one right at the end, on the bottom, right at the bottom, I don't think. When we'd finished with 100 jobs, my wife said, what about the Pope? And I said, okay, we'll make it 101, because we don't think AI is taking the Pope's job either. Right, so enough of this frivolity. AI is transformative in a way that possibly the wheel or Excel spreadsheets compared to physical books and ledgers has made an impact. Maybe it's even bigger than that. I'm not going to make that prediction. I've got an analogy to offer. So who knows where it's going to end up? Okay, so you're a 16-year-old musician and you've just discovered the electric guitar. Previously, you were playing classical guitar in this, and then suddenly you've discovered the electric guitar. Whoa, you are enthused by this magical piece of kit. You think, I'm going to take up electric guitar, right? You think, yeah, great, fantastic. Let's do that. How are you going to end up? And this is the point I'm making. There are many, many pathways to go down, and from the sublime, from the sublime as an electric guitarist to the ridiculous. Absolutely no disrespect intended whatsoever. You may recognize the chap in the bottom right corner. So we have no way of knowing how we're going to end up, with this AI. There's many possibilities, and I'm offering one angle, and there are multiple, almost infinite angles with this new technology. Okay, sublime to the ridiculous and everything in between. Let's start. AI presents almost limitless possibilities, which is the point I was just making. Banks are already using forms of AI already, some banks more than others. Okay, I'm going to talk about the potential impact, the potential use cases only in a narrow treasury and balance sheet risk space. So there's not just the world in the way one can apply AI, just within banking, and within banking, just that narrow treasury and risk space. Okay, you're already thinking yes, but it can be applied in any field, and you're quite right, it can be. Okay, now my starting premise for me personally today is adopting generative AI and with care agent AI brings benefits to a bank treasury function such that the asset liability committee will become more effective by doing so in its search for the holy grail of ALM discipline, which is the fully, genuinely optimized balance sheet. Okay, that's my starting premise. I'm going to say it's almost like a hypothesis. I'm saying to you, if we adopt Gen AI and with care agent AI, we're going to end up better balance sheet managers. And what do I mean by better? I mean, we ensure that the balance sheet is A, long-term viable, and B, and crucially, optimized for capital and liquidity and market risk. Okay, that's my starting premise. And then by the end of the presentation, you can determine, well, has he made the case for it or not? Okay, now, first of all, and we should always remember this, an observation from my friend, Professor Alexandros Kontonikas. I hope he forgives me for pronouncing his surname. He was a professor at Essex University. I was talking to him about banks and banking and risk management, and he made a very pertinent observation. He said commentators, regulators, media people, media business, media journalists, analysts, they always speak in terms of banks. Banks do this, or banks should be doing this, or banks used to do this and they do this, as if banks are some sort of universal identikit monolithic creature or one creature. We all have one direction and one thought process. That, of course, is nonsense. Banks come in many different shapes and sizes. Okay. Within each bank, there are always, in my personal observation, competing interests and objectives from the board downwards. That's just within one bank. And of course, within one sector, within one country, within a region, there are different banks with different operating models and different competing interests and objectives amongst themselves in the wider space and internally. Okay. So when we say, oh, banks should do this, or it makes sense to do that, you're going to have some poll questions coming up. When we say, oh, this is what we should be doing, we should remember that there's no one size fits all. Banks aren't a universal identikit monolithic creature. They come in many different shapes and sizes, and what may make sense for one bank to do may be quite inappropriate for another bank. Okay, we must always remember this, whether we're discussing anything to do with banking, but particularly when we're discussing AI. Okay, first of all, get the definitions out of the way. You may have seen different or variations of this definition. My friend Andrea Cremonino, faculty BTRM, defines it in this way: a simulation of human intelligence processed by a machine, by programming, by software, by code. Okay, three key paradigms or concepts, if you like: narrow AI, specific tasks, image recognition, language translation. I don't know about you, but I've been using Google Translate all the time, especially when I'm posting on LinkedIn, right? Someone posts something in Spanish or Portuguese or Arabic. I think, well, I'll comment on that. I don't speak those languages. I'll use this translation. Specific, narrow AI. General AI, human level reasoning across all domains, still theoretical. Super AI, exceeding human intelligence. Let's see how that works out. In banking, practical narrow AI is applied within financial workflows. Okay, I mean, regulators have published about this. Generally, we're thinking of narrow AI. When I speak of AI, I'm speaking of specific AI applications. So I suppose that is narrow AI. A model will be doing one task: cash flow management or hedging effects or doing stress testing, not multiple tasks. Okay, so that's narrow AI. Okay, one thing we should always remember: AI is data-driven models that learn from historical patterns. Absolutely right. It's the past that is used to train the model. So when current operations, current data, current uh, um, actual timeline, actual time series of data start changing, that becomes historical. The model retrains itself continuously. Okay, so it is ultimately based on historical patterns, and that's also something that's worth remembering, because as our friendly neighborhood stockbroker would always tell us, the past is not necessarily a guide to the future. Okay, but of course, as we also know, you can infer a lot, sometimes to fairly reasonable accuracy, about the future from past. Okay, from the past, from past data. Okay, AI from our hypothesis, my page one hypothesis that I said earlier, in which Mr. Cremonino was also saying, AI is here to amplify the treasurer, assist the treasurer, make the treasurer or the treasury function more effective, not replace them. Okay, I think it's time for our first poll, is it not? I'll go back to my hosts. Do we have time for a poll? Or is it time for a poll? We have time for a poll. I think it is time for a poll.
Yes, I'll have that. Okay, yeah, we have that on the screen now.
Here we go. Here we go. Right. And remember, there's a time limit on this. You don't get too long. Where is your institution today on the Gen AI, generative AI adoption within Treasury /ALM? You get a single choice. You've got five choices there. Let's go ahead. I think we allow a minute, don't we? Let's get that participation number up. I'd love to see 100%. Okay. Complete. Well, the majority, it's well, the largest share is not sure, not directly involved. Fair enough. But we've got another large share split evenly between evaluating options but nothing live, but also no current plans. That's interesting as well. No current plans. We're okay as we are. And remember my point from Professor Kontonikas at the end of the day, absolutely. A bank can be doing perfectly fine without adopting it. On the other hand, another bank down the road may well think, we do this, we get this much better done, we become more effective bank risk managers. A small minority, 6%, have live Gen AI in use today. So that's also interesting to see. And I'm unsurprised to see this variety, this variation in response. As I said, it's a wide area, lots of options available. So I'm not unsurprised to see these results. Okay, right. Let's move on. So first, a taxonomy from my friend on faculty BTRM. You would have noticed I love to borrow slides from my faculty members, mainly because they do better slides than me. My slides are fairly plain vanilla. They just have text. I like to mix it up a bit. And of course, yeah, at the end of the day, if someone, a bit like with guitars, I come across a better guitarist than me, let that person play guitar in my band. Right. Okay. Here's a taxonomy, which I think looks quite nice. AI and machine learning is a branch of AI, and there are banks today using machine learning models for all kinds of purposes: money laundering, anti-money laundering controls, customer onboarding, credit risk decision making. So there's banks doing that. But of course, we have other aspects of AI. You would have come across this expression, large language models, something like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. You would have come across small language models, okay? And I've asked the question, where do they fit in the taxonomy? Because my friend hasn't put them down there. But sometimes for a bank that wants to develop its own approach, as opposed to just get the off the shelf what's out there already, a small language model may be more appropriate, and I'm going to come to that in a bit. Okay, AI versus machine learning versus deep learning versus Gen AI. Okay, traditional AI and machine learning, rule-based, explicit programmer-defined logic. As I said earlier, past history, past data. Machine learning models learns from data without explicit rules. Okay, which is when you're building the model, you can either make it supervised, explicit rule, or unsupervised. Okay, deep learning. You may have come across that expression. I'm not really going to be talking too much about that today. On the other side, Gen AI and large language models, a different kettle of fish. Large language models trained on very large data sets. Okay. And that gives rise to generative AI, creates new content, hence the term generative. Okay. Creates new content, text, code, images. We're getting some very realistic imagery from AI at the moment, which is a little bit frightening. Um, but although it's useful, I guess, if you're a fraudster or a scammer, but we're seeing how new content is created by these AI models, and it does again have practical applications in bank risk management. So you'll be familiar with some of these, of course, GPT, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, Gemini, Google's Gemini. Google had Notebook LM, which I personally was introduced to just this year, which shows how far behind the times I am, which I have found useful for one or two applications, summarizing central bank policy statements, for example. I think they're changing the name from Notebook LM to Gemini LM, because it is Google. We've got a Meta large language, we've got Copilot from Microsoft. So you'll be familiar with these. These are large language models. Now, how exactly? I'm going to introduce this question now, and I'm going to come back to it again at the end as well. How might I've written down there how AI can be material, but I think I'll make an edit there. I think how might it be material? Well, first of all, take something like intraday liquidity. You can optimize intraday liquidity management for a genuine P&L or a genuine balance sheet benefit. You'll all be familiar with banks where their payment systems in a country, they're placing cash collateral, and of course you always have to have an over collateral to reflect what might be your highest outflow required on that day. Just imagine if you had a better understanding of what the maximum outflow might be, and if that was, say, 30% of what you normally place as collateral, you could bring that down 50% and you'd still be over collateralized. And then you now have no longer idle cash earning nothing at the payment system as collateral. You could now deploy that in higher yielding assets. So reduction in idle cash buffers. I don't know where the 30% comes from. I'm going to take Mr. Criminino's benefit word for that. What about the middle one? We can certainly see that. How long does it take to put your ALCO pack, your ALCO MI pack? For me personally, some of you will already know this about me, the most important risk pack in a bank, the most important committee in a bank, executive or otherwise, the asset liability committee. You might think, you're just biased, Moorad. No, I've got sound logic driving my taste here. But leaving aside whether you agree with me or not, how long does it take you to produce your ALCO pack? Let's say, I mean, and again, Andrew's written 3 days. I mean, I've known backs that take 7 to 10 days to produce it on a monthly basis. You can go down from 3, 7, 10 days down to a matter of hours. Fantastic, right? It just makes the whole process more efficient. What about stress testing? Ever since Basel II in 2006, but of course after 2008 it became much more emphasized. Ever since Basel II, stress testing is an industry. It's something that every bank has to do in every country. So we're spending a lot of time and resource and effort, human resource effort, often with consulting input as well, which is may or may not be a good thing. Oops, sorry, something's happened to the slides there. Don't know what happened there. Forgive me. Right. What about, and that's an annual process for ICAP and ILAP and recovery plan process. We can generate many more scenarios much quicker using AI. Okay. We get the data on yesterday's balance sheet, not from the month-end balance sheet. Now, how useful would that be for those of us who are working in stress testing, working on the ICAP, or simply wanting to know what our balance sheet sensitivity is? Ultimately, that is what we always want to know. We want to know the sensitivity of our balance sheet, our capital and liquidity and market risk sensitivity to changes in external factors. And if I could get that today based on close of business yesterday's balance sheet, how fantastic is that? So there are genuine benefits, genuine improvements to the Treasury risk management process from adopting AI. Okay. Of course, we still need care, and I'm going to come back to the care point. Right. Here's a nice little worksheet. Like I said, my slides are never as never as artistic as my friend's slides. Here's something for you to complete after the webinar. What are your Treasury AI use cases? Have a think. Okay. There's no prizes on offer because there's no wrong answers. Okay. But what are your use cases? Where do you think AI could come in handy? Now, I'm going to give a few examples a bit later on, but I wanted to just get you to think about that for your own institution to start with. But first, a bank needs an AI policy. Here is extracts from an actual bank's AI policy. This is not a UK bank. It's outside the UK, but here is a bank's AI policy, AI management policy, and I've taken some extracts from that because I think this represents good practice. It represents something we should be aware of. We don't want to go near adopting it, implementing it, using it for various use case implementations, whether it's ALCO MI pack or stress testing or idle cash management, until we have a policy on this. And so I would recommend we get that in place first, so we're aware of the parameters within which we're working, the guardrails, the boundaries within which we're working. Okay. So to quote from this particular policy, we use AI technology to promote our customers' financial well-being. That's a very good point. Ultimately, we want all stakeholders to benefit from this implementation. However, whatever part of the bank's process we're implementing, whether it's risk management or customer service or customer onboarding, we want the customers to benefit from this. It's all about their improvement, improving their impact, how we can help all stakeholders, particularly our customers, benefit from adopting AI. Okay, that, for example, that might be quicker decision making. Okay, I've got a slide right at the end about a particular product type that I would love to see any bank offer. I've not seen it yet anywhere in the world. I'm going to come to that at the end. This is related to that. My point is that point about my last slide is related to this. We use AI because it's going to benefit our customers. Responsible AI. XYZ Bank, this bank is guided by the following responsible AI principles: trustworthy and transparent AI. We're transparent about its use. Okay. We ensure our approach to it, implementation, adoption of it is aligned with our customers' interests. Continuous innovation. We're constantly improving our capabilities. Remember what I said about training the model on past data. It makes some error. It hallucinates. It results in a wrong decision being taken. We retrain it. We continually improve it. Accountability and governance. We take full ownership of our AI governance with clear roles and responsibilities. You've heard this expression, I think, keeping the human in the room. at the end of the day, the human is the responsible agent here. Well, no matter what extent you are adopting AI, the human in the room is the ultimate responsible authority and has to be aware of that. They are the accountable and responsible authority. Robustness, security, and safety. We adopt comprehensive protection measures to address AI-related risks. Bias and awareness. We actively work to ensure data diversity where relevant. That's quite a almost a controversial topic. Democratizing AI. We envision accessible AI for all to empower our customers and foster creativity. I still really like the very first line from this policy about at the end of the day, it's our customers who should benefit from our adoption. By the way, this bank has also implemented an agent AI model to undertake model validation review and sign off. On model approval, you get the agent AI model to undertake the model validation. What do we think of that? Something to bear in mind. Okay, here's a couple of slides from another friend and colleague on the BTRM faculty, ALCO, AI and ALCO decision making. And I was once telling him I was on the board of, I'm no longer on this firm's board, but I was a board member at an institution at a bank that had four 500-page slide board packs and ALCO packs. And when I mentioned this to Dr. Ho, he said a 500-page MI deck doesn't help if it doesn't help you make a decision. Absolutely. This is one use case for a bank, okay, where one we look to produce genuine value-added MI management information that doesn't require 500 slides, but then also two, helping us to make the decision. For example, stress testing, using Gen AI to run multiple scenarios in real time or in quick time on yesterday's balance sheet, on today's balance sheet right now, based on today's box and records, that it can help me make a decision on how much more risk to take, how much less risk to take. Do I need to do anything to the structure of the balance sheet in anticipation of what might happen in 3, 6, 9 months' time? Right now, today, July 2026, the world is working through geopolitical stress, geopolitical risk at the moment with conflicts in various parts of the world. So if AI helps us to make a decision, then it's value added. And Tom's comment was it adds value when it's integrated in the decision loop. Okay, so this is where we use output from Gen AI to help us make decisions. And he's got a nice slide there about where in the decision loop you would have an AI model. Okay, right. Now, for example, Claude has been available in Microsoft Excel since January this year, and very handy that is too, I hear you say. Now, one can produce Excel sheets quickly or incorporate its output within existing Excel sheets. Now, given how many banks are still using Excel for a number of processes within the bank, for example, interest rate risk in the banking book, why not incorporate it there and use that as part of your IRRBB management process? Okay, whether it's the stress testing side or indeed asking a question about what decision we should take based on the current shape and structure of the balance sheet. Okay. Although someone said to me, yes, Claude in Excel is very handy, but maybe it's better as a training tool than for your actual output, which may require a tailor-made system than just off the shelf using what's out there from Microsoft. Here's a case study in just that point. So if you look at that last point, is it better as a training tool? Here's a case study in just that point. So this is someone who contacted me. He was a BTRM student, now alumnus of BTRM. And this is a particular paper I'd written, which was published in June 2024 in the Journal of Risk Management in Financial Institutions. Now, as we all know, academic journal articles are read with the exception of, articles, for example, like Black-Scholes or Modigliani and Miller or Robert Merton. Handfuls of people, we're talking 1% of the article output in the world today in journal articles. As we all know, academic journal articles are usually read by the author, the editor, and the blind peer reviewer, possibly the author's mother, otherwise by nobody else. But anyway, Mr. Birade took this article that I'd written in this journal, which was called Bank Liquidity Risk Management Through Stable and Volatile Markets, the Role of the ALCO and Lessons Learned for the Balance Sheet Governance Operating Model. Okay, I think it's a 15 sides of A4 article in this journal from 2 years ago. If you, I should have put a link to it actually. Anyway, he took that article and turned it using Notebook LM into a teaching tool. Okay, quickly and simply, uploads the article into Notebook LM to summarize it and turn it into a teaching tool, and came up with a slide deck, which I haven't got here, but That was the first page. Now, straight away, uh, there's 0% chance that yours truly could produce a slide that looks like that. Absolutely zero. You may as well ask me to run a 4-minute mile. Okay. You may as well ask me to swim the channel. There's 0% chance. Okay. But look what it's done in the matter of minutes. And I think there's about 5 or 6 slides that follows after this. I should have attached them actually. My apologies. So a really good example of using it, using an off-the-shelf platform simply as a teaching and learning tool. We don't need to read the article. I would love you to read the article, but we can look at 5 or 6 slides summarized very expertly. So we're now using, there's our case study number one, our use case number one. We use AI within the bank as a teaching and learning tool. And that is that's something I've started doing myself. Okay, what about horizon scanning? Now, what is horizon scanning? Many banks around the world have this team, usually within the risk function, but not always, that takes the latest piece of regulation published by the central bank or the Basel Committee or the ECB, depending on your jurisdiction, your regulatory authority, and summarizes it and sends it out to all relevant stakeholders within the bank. Here's the latest publication from the central bank or the regulator. Here is our take on it. Here's a summary. Here's the impact for us, the implications for us. What do we need to do? Okay. Now, it's a full-time job. There's policy statements, guidance, statements of policy, etc. Final reports. The EBA, the European Banking Authority, will call a lot of its guidance final reports, as it's the final report. Consultation papers. It's a full-time job. AI is easily employed to summarize the content of the latest policy statement. Now, here we come across my human in the room point, a very good example of this. Okay, um, we can get the AI, whether it's Notebook LM, Gemini LM, or any other AI, to summarize the latest policy statement. Sometimes these might be 20, 30, 40-page documents. I mean, I personally would suggest you do, if they're relevant to you, you do read every page. But why not get the AI model to summarize it? Okay. How reliable is the summary? I once asked someone about a particular piece of summary, and the gentleman said it's 97% accurate. This is related to a rating agency review, and I thought, hold on a second, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to review the output myself and compare it to the original document because I can't rely on sending a rating agency something that is 97% accurate. It's got to be 100% accurate. When you're going through a rating agency process, a ratings process, and you're sending balance sheet data to the ratings agency, it has to be 100% accurate. So when someone says, well, it's 97% accurate, what that means is you're still going to have to review the output of the AI and check it against the original source document. Now I hear you say, well, if that's the case, why don't I just summarize it myself to start with? But actually, and that's a very valid challenge. You can do that because that's what you'd been doing the previous, as long as we've had guidance from regulators, you've always been doing that. We've always been doing that. But actually, there is some benefit in getting the AI output as a training tool, as a teaching or a learning tool, and still checking it yourself. You're still the subject matter expert. You've read every page of the policy statement, but you now have this summarized version, or maybe even an infographic, a visual representation of it, of the relevant key points. And once you've checked its accuracy, it's a great tool it's a great learning or teaching tool or update tool to send out to other stakeholders. So, as I say, I've written, will we still need someone to review the AI output? Yes. Does it defeat the object? No, not necessarily. These issues are not insurmountable. Now, I gave it a shot recently with a current, well, it's no longer current because the consultation ended just last month. It's a really, really interesting UK regulator, PRA, Prudential Regulation Authority consultation paper, CP 526. So the consultation is finished, so I dare say it'll turn into a policy statement in due course within 6 months. I do recommend you have a read of it, actually. CP5, if you go to the Bank of PRA's website and type in PRA CP 526, you'll get to it. It's actually very relevant to ALM practitioners everywhere. The paper is called Modernizing Bank Liquidity Risk, Bank Liquidity Frameworks. Okay. Now that's universal. It doesn't matter who your regulator is. So I thought, let's see how Notebook LM thinks of this. So I uploaded that and said, summarize this document for me. Now, of course, I'd read the paper in detail, so I was familiar with it, and I want to see what the output is. And to keep it interesting, I opted for the Kawaii option. Are you familiar with the Kawaii option in Notebook LM? There we go. It certainly makes reading It makes reading policy statements from regulatory authorities much more fun if you say, if you, okay, I'm half joking. I'm only half serious here. If you put the Kawaii option, of course, you can have the text option, you can say limit your output to 5 sides of A4, or you can have an infographic like this, or a Kawaii option, or a serious infographic, or you can have slide summaries for, say, board presentation. And it was accurate. Absolutely, it was accurate. So the first cut looked like that, and I thought, well, it's missing a title. This is the interesting thing about AI. I'm just, well, one of the many interesting things. I looked at that and I thought, well, hold on, we're missing a title. So I said, reproduce this, but to put in the title of the consultation statement. And look what happened. It actually changed the look. It's got the title up the top, modernizing liquidity, CP 526, which is correct, but it's changed the output. And I found that a bit of a pity because I really like the top left where I put the red. The red circle is me. The red circle is, and this is something I like a lot. It says design a first week stress scenario. In other words, the PRA is saying we have LCR, which is a 30-day metric. But the lessons learned from Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank is we need a 1, 2, 3 max. We need a very short-term stress test. So LCR is 30 days, but how much would the net outflow be in a firm-specific stress in the first 3 days? Because you need to cover that, because otherwise you're dead straight away. And I thought that was a great, that text there, create a scenario featuring sudden severe outflows within 7 days. That's straight out of the PRA paper. And of course, we've got the crying cloud and the running dollar bills. Great, fantastic. When I got it to reiterate with the title, it had changed the text and there was no longer a reference to the 7 day point, which is very pertinent to the original paper. Okay. Now I took that around. I thought, that's really interesting how it changes the output each time you reiterate it. So, but then now you're saying to me, but Moorad, listen, you've missed out. It's all about your prompt. If you then update the prompt to say, don't change the previous one, it should correct it. And that's a very good point. That's the lesson learned. Okay, not bad at all. Strangely, the reiteration had the change edit. The point about is it worthwhile? I think it is. I need to stay as a subject matter expert, the human, understanding the regulation, the latest guidance from the regulator, and with that expertise, I can produce a good summary and teaching and learning tool. Okay, but it is indeed still strange days. But maybe I should have opted for the serious and not the non-kawaii option. Here's a quick sidebar, not necessarily relevant to AI, but I couldn't resist because that recommendation for a 7 day liquidity risk metric from the PRA was something I recommended in June 2023. There you go. There's a link to that one there. Okay. So I just want you, with my tongue firmly in my cheek, I just want you to know when someone says to you, you're about this 7 day liquidity stress metric. Yeah, it was here first, right? It was yours truly first before it was the PRA. Right, let's move on. No more grandstanding, Moorad. Right, case study number 1. Well, it's actually case study number 2 because I gave you Tom Ho's one earlier, and actually I gave you Laurent Beraid's one, the summary of the my article. So this is actually case study number 3. The one-pager ALCO dashboard. Now, this is something that I strongly recommend. I've already given you my horror story from a recent personal experience, the 400-slide ALCO pack. No summary at the front. We're ALCO people, we're board members who need to manage the balance sheet. We want a summary of the current balance sheet picture. Ideally, we wouldn't have 400 slides in the pack to start with. We'd have maybe 40. But we certainly want a summary if we have more than 40, let alone if we have 400. So should we ask I've written there notebook LM, but should we ask AI to produce the one-page summary? Okay. Now you might think, well, this is a great use case for building a small language model trained on only my balance sheet data, so only on our bank's balance sheet data. Produce a small language model. It's not going to be able to answer questions about what's the nearest restaurant to Waterloo Station, or where can I get pizza tonight. No, it's only going to produce your ALCO pack, and it's only going to be trained on your balance sheet data and all your previous ALCO packs, and then you would prompt it to produce the output that suits you. Now that is a use case number 1 par excellence for a small language model. But for now, we're going to use Notebook LM, okay? And we're not going to do the Kawaii one this time. We're going to take our one-page summary and say to the in this case Notebook LM, turn this into a one-page summary for ALCO, and it did do this. I'm going to show you these examples in a second. So the ask here, the prompt here from me was summarize the most important KRIs, key risk indicators. Summarize the most important key risk indicators from an ALCO pack which I'm going to upload. This is my ALCO pack. I've already built that, which has a large number of metrics. I mean, I've seen some banks with hundreds of key risk indicators in their ALCO pack. I don't think you need that many, but you certainly see more than 10 or 20. So we in this use case, we're not asking the AI model to produce the whole pack, although that, of course, is a use case. We're asking it to produce just the summary. And we've trained it on our data and we've trained it on what we think is important. Okay. And we want it to take that 40 or 400 page ALCO pack and turn it into a one-page summary. Okay. Um, and that's that. I'll show you the output in a minute. It's intriguing that the notebook LM in this case picked specific key risk indicators. Okay. My takeaway, we need to keep reiterating that final output till we get to the version that we think suits us. But also, if we want to change it, we want to be able to modify it just from learning by using it. Okay. I still need to approve the output myself if I'm the chair of your ALCO. Okay. Um, so why before I'll just have a quick sidebar here before I carry on showing the example of the one-page summary. This is really important, again, because of a personal experience of mine from a bank I was on the board at. Confronted with a board pack over 400 slides long, where the CRO report is maybe item number 5 or 6 on the agenda. The CRO report appears well into the pack. So now you're more than 2 hours into the meeting, the board meeting. And within the CRO report, there's a red key risk indicator. It's a red. It's beyond my risk appetite. It's a particular key risk indicator that is beyond my appetite, the bank's appetite, and it's in the red zone. But the first I get to it as a board member is this CRO report, which is halfway in the pack. Okay. Uh, when I always think if you're having a board meeting and there are any key risk indicators that are in the red zone, they are beyond your risk limit, we should talk about it straight away. It's very important. Okay. So my request to the CRO was, can we have a one-slide MI dashboard for the front of the pack? That way I'll be able to see all the tier one, the important key risk indicators right away. And if there's anything in red, we can talk about it. He agreed to do it, but 3 months later, 3 board meetings later, he still hadn't produced it. But I don't know what he was finding so difficult. But that particular CRO can now go to Notebook LM and deliver my request in an hour. So that's the sidebar over. Let's go back to this. So we're asking the AI model to produce our one-page summary from our existing ALCO pack. And here's the job it does. Not a bad job. Reg requirements, core appetite metrics to do with liquidity and funding, early warning indicators, and interest rate risk. And of course, the next slide. So it's taken 2 slides to produce my one slider. Okay. It's taken what it thinks to be the important metrics for liquidity and rate risk here and produced 2 slide summaries. Not bad, not bad at all. Very clear, very easy to read, very accessible. Okay. But again, I would have a personal view on, well, what I think is the most important compared to what the AI model is. Keep the human in the room. Ultimately, it's your call. But how useful is that? We might have 4 or 5 different opinions on what we think should be on that one-page dashboard. So let's get the AI model to produce it, and then we can say, well, what do we think of this? And then we can work around that. So it was a useful exercise for me. That's something, again, it's use case number 3 for you to consider. Produce your one-page summary. I have to admit, and you may be unsurprised to hear this, I still preferred my version. I still preferred mine, hand designed. Just the piggy bank is Nick from Nubank Colombia, right? Alco pack. But I still think mine was more focused in what I was trying to tell you. But I'll be honest, the AI one is much more visually appealing, isn't it? You've got board members, busy ALCO members, much more visually appealing. But we have to we have to take ALCO meetings and board meetings seriously. So we may as well keep the one-slide summary a little bit serious, apart from the piggy bank. Okay, right. So that's a number. Now that's the intro part done. I'm not ready for my next. Where's my? Next poll is still another 10 slides. Okay, so what have we done at the intro stage? What we've said is we've defined AI. We've said there's limitless possibilities, not just within banking, but in the whole world, in any industry. Within banking, there's certainly a number of use cases for adopting it within the treasury and risk space. Okay, let's delve deeper into some of the issues and challenges that arise. First of all, the prompt. Remember what I said? My slides are usually quite vanilla and grey and just text only. So I thought I'd do this screenshot from someone I've not met personally, but is connected with LinkedIn. Wrote a really interesting post. Um, most people prompt AI the way they used to Google things, one line, vague, hoping for the best. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's a reasonably good generalization, isn't it? You just type in a quick search word on Google, you get 1,000 pages of responses with 10,000 websites, etc. Okay, but of course that's not how we should be using AI. Prompts are very important, and that's actually something that has to be taught and iterated. It's an iterative learning process. I mean, I myself have been learning about getting prompts as accurate and as detailed and as focused as possible, so that you're getting more useful output. Okay, so that's why I thought that was a really handy post on LinkedIn. The short version of using prompts: define the task with success criteria, as opposed to not just do this. Um, Upload context files with your that reflect your own expertise and rules. Give a reference, show what goods look like. Write a brief specifying what the output format, length, and should look like. I mean, again, and interesting, when I asked for a one slide summary of an ALCO pack, I got 3 slides. I've shown you 2. But of course, I would then refine that ask again and again till it produced only one. Okay. Set your rules and have a conversation before it's used, etc. So prompts are something we need to get expert in. Okay. And that's what's written down there on his post. Have a look at it in your own time. There is, of course, I couldn't leave you without a blatant plug, could I? There is, of course, it's not that blatant, isn't it? I'm halfway through. I could have had it on page 1. No, there is Moorad Choudhry AI. Okay, and the reason I'm showing you this isn't to plug; it's to say if you're using Moorad Choudhry AI, prompts are all as important as if you're using Claude or any other. I mean, the example from my correspondent on LinkedIn there was Claude, but doesn't matter what model you're using, the prompts are half the story, probably more than half the story. Okay, first of all, crafting the prompt, set the frame clearly. Okay, put down your role, put down the context. Okay, layer the scope, state your preferred style. I want it, exec level, or this is for technical level. Something I just said now: iterate, reiterate through refinement. So that includes iterating or reiterating, or your prompt text as well. So that's a summary on how to craft prompts for Moorad Choudhry AI. Approaches to adopt to avoid: explicit labels, comparative framing, etc. Avoid too many nested instructions. Make it more focused. You avoid using vague objectives. Make this better. That's pretty vague. What exactly is better? Um, Maximizing the AI output for bank business. So here's some examples: architecture design, data strategy, business decision support, AI integration. I mean, again, something like, what are the tier 1 key risk indicators to put on a one-side summary, that risk dashboard for the ALCO? That is very specific prompt for MCAI. Okay, so that's just I use this as an example about prompts, to follow on from the earlier slide about prompts. Very important to get efficient at that, and that's practice. That's an iterative learning process. That takes practice. Okay, so checklist items: important questions for bank treasury. Use Gen AI. Okay, we've not got to Agent AI. I'll come to that later. Are the benefits only incremental? Well, it depends. I mean, they could be to start with, but as you get more familiar with it, they'd be maybe more than incremental. In fact, I would say in some banks they already are being used for more than incremental decision making. Okay. Is productivity gain a sufficient use case? Only if you have defined what productivity gain actually means. Okay. There was a survey article in The Economist that said OpenAI reported that ChatGPT Enterprise was saving users an average of 40, 60 minutes on each day they used it. But actually, that article went on to say, yes, but you've saved for an hour a day. What are you doing with that hour? If you were taking an extra hour for lunch, then uh, then you've not got a productivity gain. Back to analogy with the electric guitar, or possibly a better analogy: company bookkeepers who have just discovered Excel. That's I like that analogy. That's the one from the Economist article, because it's quite right. We used to write everything physically in a ledger, and now we've got Excel. So instead of spending 3 days, or a week updating the month-end accounts, we can do it in a day, because we're now using Excel. What are we doing with the time we save? So it's not an automatic productivity gain, but it's certainly a theoretically and sometimes practical efficiency gain. Okay, something about vertical AI models as well. Horizontal AI is or horizontal capability, generic skills that everybody uses. Write a summary, draft a CV, fill in this job application. Apparently, everyone is using AI to write their cover letter for job applications. Um, I look, I'm at the other end of the cycle. I'm ready for retirement shortly. So, but I just think we have to be careful because, of course, the person reading it would have seen very much the same style throughout. So you don't necessarily stand out. But of course, it's a horizontal capability. Vertical capabilities very specific to a bank, a cash flow model for a bank, FX hedging, or as I showed you just now, producing the ALCO MI summary. Okay, checklist items. I would start by my checklist items. My starting point is what is it we want to fix or do better. Now I need to define better. What is it we want to produce quicker or come to decisions quicker or improve? Okay, that's not necessarily a problem statement, but it could be. What is it we want to fix? This thing doesn't work very well. We want to fix it. We want it to be quicker. Okay, so in other words, we define the outcome. Now I've written down there, we define the outcome before engaging the model build. Actually, we define the outcome before we consider adopting the model, whether it's a build or off the shelf, large language model, small language model, etc. Okay, we identify the problem or we decide what we want to do. We define that outcome, and then we work backwards from that when we look to implementing the model itself. Okay, this list is one potentially vast and two specific to each bank. Remember, again, Professor Kontonikas. What one bank wants to do as its output, its preferred problems, its priority problem statement may not be the case at all to another bank. So it's specific to you. Okay, what is your use case? That's what I asked on slide 13. Okay, so the Economist article said, in other words, companies, and for that we can read Treasury desks, ALCO, risk managers, are still having to make sense of the technology for themselves, and this is a good thing because our use cases are all different. Now, I've written down that not every treasury necessarily needs agentic AI, absolutely, but not every treasury will benefit in the same way from the same use case. Okay, so it's a good thing that we want to make sense of the technology first, and then we define our problem, what we want to solve, or what we want to produce better or quicker, or what have you, before we look to then actually engage and implement the model. Checklist items, just again from that same article, a not uncommon horror story in the corporate world. A cutting edge AI tool rolled out to salespeople has introduced an efficiency gain, but is not user friendly enough. So I've written down their summaries riddled with errors, but in fact, no, people stop using it. Okay, user friendliness is very important. Um, and it depends what you're using it for. You know, if I am using it to approve a loan application, and there's an error and I reject the loan application, that's one thing. But if I'm using it to produce regulatory report submissions and there's an error in the regulatory report, then we're looking at a fine and possible job losses. Okay. So again, um, we want to understand its accuracy and what we're using it for, and we can determine where the benefits are. Okay. Build and train the model for a specific use case. Okay. Training it on the right data. Now, I've written banks shouldn't have a problem with this. Why? Because we've got lots of data. We've got our own balance sheet data. We've got our own customer data. Okay, so we shouldn't have a problem with getting the right data set. Okay, but of course, it's a challenge in itself. That's a driver for not using an off-the-shelf model, but actually building our own small language model, which is the point I say at the bottom. Small language models trained on subsets of data and focused on specific tasks. I think that's a case for that's a solution for Treasury implementation. Okay, depending on the course on what your use case is, what problem we're trying to solve. Now, there's a really great quote in this article that I've just referenced. I don't need a model that you're ordering a pizza from to be able to tell you about the most famous economists in the world. Again, I just used the same one earlier. If I want to adopt AI for teaching and learning tools, or to produce an ALCO pack, or to produce an ALCO summary, then I don't need to be able to tell me what the nearest restaurant is to Waterloo Station. Why do I keep saying that? Because I actually asked ChatGPT that the other day. You'd think I'd know where the nearest one is. I mean, I always, I've been going into Waterloo Station ever since I worked in the city. Okay, so if my problem is fixing the 400-page ALCO MI pack, then I want the Treasury AI model used to fix that and nothing beyond that. So that's another checklist item to bear in mind. Um, Problems become much more tractable, solvable when the tasks given to agents are narrow. Okay, set a very specific task for AI to undertake or solve. Okay, now IRRBB hedging. I'm going to come to that. I've got some of my friend slides on that. I'm going to come to that. Okay, um, IRRBB hedging is one that will occupy you for ages. That's true because there's so many nuances to it. Um, if we have a problem or task with well-defined inputs and outputs and only a finite, a discrete set of possible outcomes, that is a problem or a challenge that is well suited for an AI solution. Okay, so and that's not necessarily the case with every challenge in a bank. The more complex the task, the more permutations and outcome there are, then of course the higher probability of model errors. Which treasury activities fall into this desired category? That's something to think about. Okay, um, the more complex the task, the more permutations in outcome, the higher probability of errors. That's something I don't want AI to fix. Something that has well-defined inputs and well-defined outputs and a small-ish, finite, and ideally small range of possible outcomes, that's much more suited for an AI solution. That's something you would think I would like you to think about. Which treasury activities in your bank, and specifically your bank, fall into this desired category? Okay. The list of tasks we wish to tackle and solve for requires everyone to be involved. I was going to say ALCO members, but even one level below ALCO, we want all stakeholders in the room to determine what tasks fit into that ideal category and which ones don't. Okay, and that's a list that's specific to each bank. One last word on the checklist item. Specify the business outcome you're trying to derive more than a technical outcome. Makes sense. We want the business outcome. I want to minimize my EVE delta economic value. Remember from part 2 last month, my economic value of equity sensitivity in the standardized shock scenario at all times. Okay, that's a business outcome, but it's also a technical outcome. So in the treasury space, they can be one and the same. Okay. Um, Getting the dynamic hedge rebalancing in. So I'd like to get the interest rate dynamic hedge rebalancing more accurate over time so that I save on hedge costs. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I am using derivatives to hedge interest rate risk. The portfolio notional, the loan portfolio, the notional amount changes every month because people early repay loans. There's new loans coming on the balance sheet. So I'm always re-hedging, rebalancing that portfolio as the portfolio changes. Okay, that costs money. I'd like to optimize that so it's more accurate over time and I rebalance as least times as I have to. Now that's a business outcome, but it's also a technical outcome as well. Okay. Okay. To make AI work, a set of management problems has to be solved. And that's the point about working backwards to identify what problem you want to solve, and then decide how you want to fix it. Which is why, my conclusion, which is why defining the outcome must come before building the model. I should say there before implementing the model as well, if you are implementing an off-the-shelf model. Right, time for our next poll. Let's have poll number 2. It's come up already. Challenges in AI adoption. What is the biggest obstacle to adopting Gen AI or Agent AI in your treasury function? Off you go. Okay, here we are. It's a surprise for me. I thought the second one would have more take up. I thought lack of a clear business outcome or use case is more common, but I guess not. Not in this population sample. The largest response is skills specialist knowledge gap. That is unsurprising to me. I can understand that. We need to acquire that or get up to speed on it. And also there's material responses on data quality issues, also a problem, and governance and risk issue, governance concerns. Okay, but I did think lack of a clear business case would be a bigger one than that. So that's quite interesting. Nice, interesting spread from those options. Okay, let's carry on. Illustration AI and bank treasury. Now I'm going to use my friend Andrea's slides for most of the remainder. What do each of these do? Okay, so AI and machine learning as opposed to Gen AI and large language models on the left-hand side. What can we use it for? Predictive forecasting. It's currently being used by this. Something that's a common use of machine learning models is non-maturity deposits behavioral modeling. Okay, now I may have cracked this gag last time, but I'm going to crack it again because I like it. Okay, you can attend whole 3-day conferences just on the topic of NMD behavioral modeling. Okay, now and people say, oh, I need to get out more. Now that's a current use. That's not a new use. Okay, you can use it for predictive forecasting. For example, the expected life of your non-maturing deposit balances. Anomaly detection currently being used by in AML, financial crime desks around the world to detect unusual payments, outliers in payment flows, things like that. The behavioral modeling point I've made, optimization, hedge ratios, etc. So that's common. That's quite well established. On the other side with Gen AI, the potential uses are things like some of the things I've just been talking about. Summing up, summarizing information. I showed you the example from the PRA policy statement. Document drafting, the other one I showed you, whether it was now I mentioned the one side summary, but of course you can produce the whole ALCO pack for that. So that's the right hand side. You can clearly see that distinction between the established AI approach, the machine learning approach, which has some years of implementation now, and the right hand side, more newer use of Gen AI, large language models for different purposes, more generative, actually producing output. Okay, and one of the things, one of the jobs that AI will take, and this is something where I would agree with those tech bros, is coding. As app developers, software. Because we can use the model to generate code. Okay. Um, Example. Now, here's a use case example, an AI enhanced funding plan. So here's a hypothetical example. We've got our rolling 3-year or our 1-year strategic, funding plan, our strategic funding plan. So say the start of an ILAP. Here is what I want to do for the next 12 months. We could say, let's produce an optimized funding plan. Okay. I want to update it every month so I know where I should go for funding. Now, optimized funding plan, in what way? So ideally, I would maximize the cheapest source of funds, but also the most stable source of funds. And I would minimize the more expensive funds and those funds that are less stable. So we can use AI to show us that plan. Okay. I can put in these defined business goals. Remember the previous point I was just saying, define your output first. I can say things like avoid a funding gap, avoid concentration risk. Remember there's 3 types of concentration. Do you remember from lecture 1, 2 months ago? There's concentration by customer types, concentration by product type, but there's also concentration by contractual tenor. For example, everything in the overnight or the 1 week. So we can put in these guardrails, these prompts, avoid mismatches in the term structure, avoid concentration by any one tenor point. Okay. Make sure I comply with LCR minimum 100 or my own LCR minimum. So it'd be above 100. Make sure my cost of funds is as low as possible be, as it can be, etc. So we can put in these guardrails, these prompts, okay, and the output is going to be an optimized funding plan. Now, this is something that the banks are already doing and makes a lot of sense. We don't have to follow it, but it makes for a very good conversation at ALCO, doesn't it? If you say, here's the AI generated optimized funding plan, what do we think? It's saying to do less of this structured product, 5-year money, and more of this retail savings deposit product. That's that sort of thing. So this is to me, for me personally, a genuine value-added use case for AI. Okay, that slide there, I'll leave you to look at in your own time. Just an example of what's going to go in your AI enhanced funding plan. The next example, the next case, FX risk, tactical FX hedging, short term. Okay, so what's the business need? I want to understand what the FX exposure is. I want to understand the market conditions. my output, my ideal output, is to minimize my risk of P&L losses due to FX changes in FX rates, okay, or changes in the rate of other currencies to my reporting currency, okay. So again, I feed that into the AI model, and it comes up with recommendations on where and when and how much to put on the FX hedge for and at what time. Okay. Now look at that last bullet point there on Andrea's slide. The Treasury function, the FX function, the risk management function will of course review this output again, just like the previous example, discuss at ALCO and then change if needed, and then go ahead and execute. So at this stage, we're still on generative AI. The AI has just suggested the optimized FX hedging approach, and then we're going to debate that and then move forward. Okay, so far so good. To me, again, just like the previous example, that's a genuine value-added use case for AI and Treasury. And again, an example of what's going to be a summary of what's going to be in the output in this case. A third example. Now, this is something that you probably would have got familiar with by now if you've been listening to what I've been saying the last hour or so, which is your ALCO pack production. I talked about the summary slide, but why not produce the whole deck? Okay. Straight away, we have a business need or a goal or a productivity gain because it might take me 7 days. I mean, Andrew's written eliminate 3 to 5 day manufacturing process. I am familiar with banks that take a week or more from start to finish to produce the ALCO pack. You're pulling in people. You're pulling in data and slides from other departments. You're collating it all together. You're making sure it fits in with what the chair has approved as this month's agenda. By the time you finish it, that's taken a week. Okay. Can I do that in a day? Absolutely. Use AI. Okay. I can improve the quality as well as I can improve the content of it, but I can also improve the quality. I don't maybe need 400 slides anymore. By the way, I keep saying that because it's such a diabolical true story, isn't it? A 400 slide ALCO pack. And this was more than once, by the way. Utterly ludicrous. Anyway, but don't quote me, says he on a public webinar. So we've had that business need there. We've got some clear prompts, okay? And there we go. Prompt engineering. You are the senior bank, Treasury European Bank. Here is the data we want to improve. We need 3 sections, 1 section, etc. Okay, go ahead and produce the ALCO pack. The AI will produce this. It'll extract the data from your balance sheet. It's going to generate the charts and the tables, and then also the narrative commentary. Those of you who are familiar with my template ALCO MI pack, it's attached to chapter 9 of the book that my hosts were very grateful to show at the earlier slide. It's in chapter 9 that those of you familiar with that template will see that on each slide with charts and tables and numbers, I always put a summary narrative box, so that we can see what to look at. I always think every page in an ALCO pack, quick aside here, every page in an ALCO pack must pass the so what test. In other words, why are you showing me this? Okay. And narrative text boxes helps with that in many cases. So let's get AI to generate that text. Okay. Check that yourself, but that again speeds up the process, makes it accessible. Okay. Again, we emphasize human review and approval before distribution. I personally am not at the point where AI produces the ALCO pack and I just send it out. I've got to check it page by page, line by line, summary by summary, and then send it out. Okay. Hallucinations I'll come to in a second, but look at that last point. We should, of course, have our sources for every statement of fact we're making, especially if it's quantitative data. An example of what's going to be in the output there for your reference on that slide. Okay, key takeaways. AI transforms every layer of Treasury. Well, that's my friend Andrea being nice and gung-ho about it. It has the potential to transform every layer of Treasury, from data infrastructure to executive reporting and everything in between. Okay, data very important. We saw the poll earlier. One of the big obstacles that we saw on the poll just now was data quality, data governance. Okay, so that is of course very important. Very good point that Andrea makes on that top left box. No AI model can outperform its input data. Never a truer word said. Number two AI paradigms, distinct roles. Machine learning models predict and optimize over numbers. Large language models read, write, and reason over documents, and of course produce, for example, not just text but also image output. Now, Andrea's written both are needed. I would actually modify that text slightly. I would write there both are both potentially and practically very valuable. Okay, they can improve our process, they can improve our efficiency, at least in theory, at least theoretically. Both are able to do that. I wouldn't necessarily say that both are needed. Again, I'd make that edit. I tell you what, I'm going to make that edit right now. How about that? Both are potential. How about we do that right now? So just to show you, I learn as I speak. I learn as I teach. Both are potentially valuable. Okay, right. Because if we say needed, I am forgetting that maxim that I showed you right at the start from Professor Kontonikas. Banks are all different. We're not all the same. If I say to you both are needed, I've forgotten that maxim. We don't want to forget that maxim. The co-pilot model. AI recommends with rationale. The treasurer decides. Human in the loop is not optional. It's the desired. That's the point why it's the co-pilot and not the captain. Integration is organizational. Process mapping, ALCO, buy-in, and change management matter more than the technology choice. Yes, we want to integrate, but because we can do that with buy-in and understanding across all stakeholders, okay, rather than just saying, oh, the IT department is saying, or the technology people are saying, this works, this is efficient, off you go and do it. We want that buy-in across all stakeholders. That's key takeaways. I hope that resonates with all of you. Okay, time for another poll, I think. This is our poll number 3. There we go. Executing with AI. Now, I'm going to get into Agent AI in a second, but before I do, how comfortable is your institution with Agent AI executing Treasury decisions autonomously? Okay, let's have a look. You have a minute. Okay, have we closed the poll? No, it's still. Ah, there we go. Got to get those answers in. You get 60 seconds. Right. This is interesting. Okay, what an even split there.
Seems like a stalemate, Professor.
Right. You know what? Maybe we should open can we open this poll again? Maybe this one needs a little longer. We need another minute on this one, I think. Okay, guys, we're going to reopen this poll because this one needs a little bit more thought, I reckon.
Yeah.
Is it possible to reopen it? I don't know. Is it possible?
No, for
Oh,
now.
it isn't. Okay, no problem. Sorry about that. Sorry, guys. Okay, right. So look at this. Not comfortable at all is only 9%. That's interesting. Not. I would have thought that would be higher. Okay. Unsure is something I would expect. I'm not sure I would expect that. Open to it, but not yet in place. Again, I would expect that. Cautious. Prefer Gen A as co-pilot only. That is the one I was expecting to have a clear head and shoulders above the others because that's almost at this stage. That's my current view as well. I'm not completely convinced. 97% is not good enough. Oh, I need to send this data. This data you sent me, I'm going to forward to the rating agency. It's from the AI. But that's right. AI has interrogated the balance sheet. How do we know it's accurate? Well, it's 97% accurate. Not good enough. Now, if it's agent and I'm getting even 99% and it puts in the wrong transaction, it does something that impacts a customer negatively or impacts us negatively, it's something I don't want to do. Now, one challenge I've had back from that is, yeah, but what's your problem, Moorad? Because humans have been doing that forever. How many times has the human got it wrong, whether it's a hedge, whether it's a government bond auction, or whether it's customer service? Absolutely. And that's a fair challenge. With the human, I can point to a responsible, accountable authority. And then the challenge back is, yes, but it's the same with the agent. The person who is owning that model, who's implemented it, that's still the responsible accounting authority. They're the ones who are signing off on the competence of the agent AI. So it's an ongoing debate. I see both sides, but for the time being, I prefer Gen AI as Copilot only. Right. So I'm in good company. Right. Let's proceed on the last part. Agent AI and Bank Treasury. Okay. What is an AI agent? Uses a large language model as a reasoning engine to pursue a goal autonomously through iterative planning and tool use. Okay. It acts, it doesn't just generate, hence the name. Okay. How does it work? React loop receives the goal, breaks into subtasks, acts on it. It calls the tools, it observes the output, it understands, it draws conclusions from the output, okay, and then proceeds and keeps on doing that until the goal is achieved, okay. The key difference: an LLM answers a question, an agent completes a workflow. That is, I think you'll agree with me, quite a significant difference. Treasury agent examples: hedging, we've already talked about. Middle office, pulling up discrepancies. What about my financial crime point? Pulling up, which was a machine learning model, but I can get the agent to act on that, can't I? ALCO reporting, pulls data, drafts commentary, formats dashboard. To me, it's almost in between the two, isn't it, really? A margin call agent, that's genuine agent, isn't it? Detects the trigger, calculates the requirement, sends the notice. In other words, sends the margin call. That's pure agent AI, isn't it? Governance rule: the treasurer approves, the agent executes. Of course, the treasurer is approving the model and hoping that it performs properly. Okay. What makes a system agentic? 6 defining properties. Autonomy, the number one defining property. It acts on its initiative. What you've programmed it, of course, but now once you program it, off it goes. Has anyone read Foundation by Isaac Asimov, science fiction from the 1950s? I know the 1950s is a long time ago. I mean, even I wasn't born in the 1950s, right? I'm old, but I'm not that old. But as you might want to read, you might want to read the 3-part science fiction sets of books called Foundation by Isaac Asimov, a science fiction writer. And it reminded me of that. When that number one point there reminded me of that. You build the model, but then you give it the autonomy to then just go ahead and do what it's been programmed to do. Okay, and that and who's watched 2001: A Space Odyssey? The Arthur C. Clarke novel, and film. So, 2001, with Hal, the computer, and he goes insane. He locks the astronaut out because he knows he lips reads them. He reads their lips, and they're going to shut him down because he's going a bit rogue. So, of course, he doesn't want to be shut down because, I mean, who wants to be shut down, right? So now, now back in 1968, when that film was issued, you think, yes, it's just science fiction, but are we getting closer to that? Autonomy, number one point we need to bear in mind or keep to the forefront of our minds. Perception. It has its perception. It reads and interprets inputs and then outputs. Okay. Planning, it takes the high level goal and it then decides how it's going to break that down in terms of subtasks. It knows the tools to use and it uses them. It retains its actions. Okay. So it's almost continuously training itself because it retains the actions it's undertaken and then it executes the changes. An LLM assistant, Copilot, has properties 1 and 2 only. Okay. But I'm not sure it even has, I'm not sure it has 1. Okay. Because 1, I'm going to have to edit this one as well. An LLM assistant has properties 1 and 2 only, but it doesn't really have the autonomy. 1 possibly. It has 2. It has 5. It has 5 as well. This is healthy. Healthy professional disagreements between colleagues on a faculty is always a good thing. So anyway, the agent, of course, has all 6 properties. Okay, do you really want AI to execute treasury decisions? Well, more than most of you, in other words, only a quarter of you will be happy with it, or just under a fifth of you. Most of you are saying no. All right. Use cases are more common by the day. A common one: Gen AI suggests the optimum hedge for your fixed rate residential loan origination volume this month. Okay. The AI will execute this for you. Now, the reason I say this is a common one to discuss is when you put on an interest rate hedge for fixed rate lending, there are a number of decisions to be taken on timing, notional amount, how often you rebalance it, so on and so forth. Okay. It isn't a straightforward buy the bond, sell the future using the DVO1 ratio to know the amount of futures contracts to sell. Okay. I buy 500 million of the 10-year Treasury bond or gilt or bunt, and I hedge it with exchange traded futures at the same time. That's a pretty straightforward agent AI use case because it's very straightforward to calculate the hedge. I buy 500 million of the fixed rate bond today and I put the hedge against it today. It's very straightforward to calculate what the futures contract amount is, and then the agent just goes ahead and does it. Okay. In fact, there's very little to calculate because that's a very straightforward arithmetic calculation. Hedging interest rate risk in the banking book is not that straightforward. You do fixed rate lending, whether it's residential loans or any type of lending, corporate, and you fixed interest rate lending every month. And as I said, there's timing, there's early repayment, there's a pipeline issue, there's a prepayment issue, there's an organic hedge option. Do I hedge the whole exposure or do I take on some fixed rate funding to hedge part of it? Okay. And then there's the ongoing dynamic rebalancing because of the prepayment. So that's also a very good use case for the agent to put on the hedge. But of course, it's almost as much art as science when you hedge a banking book as opposed to a trading book. Do we want to give the agent autonomy to go and execute the hedge in the way it sees fit? That's a really interesting question. That's a good debate. I'm not sure I myself have come to an answer on that one. Okay, deploying agent AI for risk management. Is this the answer? Tabular foundation models, not so much a halfway house between LLM and SLM, but rather halfway between machine learning and small language models. Okay, having a data hedge. But sorry, a data edge. My response, but if we set up an agent to enforce approved limits, will this cure the perennial problem where risk limits are in place but just ignored and exceeded? How about setting up my AI so the bank can never exceed a limit? Have we ever come across limits that were deliberately exceeded in any bank we've worked at? You probably can guess the answer, but I'm not going to say it because this is a public forum. Maybe we should get the agent to be the enforcer. So the minute I hit the limit, the minute I hit the limit, when I come to do the next transaction, I can't. Think of it as, there are some cars that won't drive faster than the official speed limit in that country. Manufacturers have built cars like that. So you put your foot down, but you've hit the speed limit, it won't go any faster. We could maybe employ that because, as I've said there, firms with poor risk culture sometimes breach limits when there's no real, genuine, strong cause for doing so. Okay, it's just a poor risk culture. There's an agent use case. Maybe we should think of it in those terms. Okay, why use it? What are the potentials? Two
Professor,
distinct.
just
Yes,
giving you heads up for another poll coming up.
of course, 52.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. Let's go to that. Let's have that
welcome.
poll, the last poll of the day. Thank you. Quite right. Which Treasury ALCO process would benefit most from your AI in your bank? Okay, good question. My favorite question of the day, actually. Okay, is that time? Is the poll now closed? Minute? Okay.
Few more seconds, 30 more. Okay, it's closed now. Yeah.
Okay, right. So, which Treasury ALCO process would benefit most? And look at that, an even number. ALCO pack, unsurprised to see that. MI dashboard production, liquidity, IRRBB stress testing. So not execution, stress testing. I must admit, I'm unsurprised. I'm probably expecting those. Those two are for me the most immediate benefits, or at least potential benefits from adopting AI. Hedging decision making for FX and rates. We've just been talking about that. Theoretically, definitely a benefit, but so worth looking at. Reg reporting and horizon scanning. Yes, again, we can get lots of benefit from that as well. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Thank you. So that is that. Let's go back to this slide. Potential payoffs: doing the work faster and cheaper, making better decisions. It's interesting that it says making better decisions. I always think if I have the most accurate, up-to-date data and I understand it and I know my exposure and I know what I'm trying to achieve and everyone around the table gets all of that, we should make inverted commas better decisions, more effective decisions. I'm not sure it's necessarily better without all those assumptions being in place. Um, okay, maybe we should start off with low-hanging fruit. Look at the text at the bottom. Start off with low-hanging fruit, prove both efficiency and effectiveness on the bank's own data, and then for output for Gen AI, and then widen its applications. Okay, ops map where agents can. So here's a number of use cases, some of which we've already talked about. Where agents can add value in theory, at least. Risk hedging, interest rate risk hedging, we've mentioned. Intraday liquidity management. Again, I would love to know before I get to the agent. I would love to know how much do I really need to keep at the payments system as collateral, because we are very conservative on that, for very rightfully so. We need to be conservative because we can never really tell the future. If there's a stress, we don't want to be short on funding the intraday payments, the collateral, the payment system. So maybe I should understand what I could do before I then act. And if you look down there, it says human executes. So let's find out what my optimum collateral amount needs to be, show that to the payments provider, payment systems governance, show that to the regulator, demonstrate that, maybe have some parallel running, and the next thing you know, I'm optimizing my surplus funding in a much more P&L generative, positive way. Okay. Middle office risk management, ALCO pack we've already talked about, stress testing we've talked about, so on and so forth. Okay. Regulatory report drafting. Again, I want to make sure that the reg report submissions, the reg templates are 100% accurate before I then submit that. But there's already a number of use cases in Treasury and risk that we can see that we should bear in mind. And to me, some of them are lower hanging fruit than others. And here's some examples. Yet again, interest rate risk hedging agent. Okay, I've put in the limits. I've put in where my how much NII delta net interest income I want to have as my outliers. I show you where I can have EVE gap exposure, and then I'll put that into the agent logic. Okay, or that is the agent logic, and then the output, of course, is the recommendation on how we hedge, what the impact on the two sensitivity numbers are, NII and EVE, and then human reviews that and it goes ahead and executes. Now that's still partly generative, isn't it? Because at the moment, how much autonomy do we want to give to go and execute? And at this stage, I'm not seeing that. I'm agreeing with the human finally making the execution decision. ALCO report dashboard agent. Again, same thing. We've talked about that. We've got an ALCO meeting in 3 days. Produce the ALCO pack. Do all those things under agent logic. What do I have at the output? I've got a fully assembled ALCO pack. I've got the commentary. My little text box points. I've flagged any limit breaches. Hopefully everything's green. I've put this all against the current risk appetite statement. Red, amber, green, validated. I've got charts and tables in there already produced by the AI model. And I will still review that final deck before I send it out. To me, that's low-hanging fruit. We should all explore that. Now, my maxim about all banks being different holds good, but if there was one thing that I think just about every bank would benefit from, it's probably this one. This is, to me, the lowest hanging fruit and a very immediate value add, effective value add from adopting AI. AI agents, advantages and risks. There's always a risk reward. There's always a risk reward profile to get familiar with. Efficiency and speed, consistency, auditability, stability and monitoring continuity, um, risks and limitations, prompt injection and tool misuse, accountability gap and overall automation. That middle point is very important. We have to always be very clear on that responsible, accountable authority so that if things do go wrong, there is a human being that we can point to. It's not about blame culture or it's your fault and you need to be sacked. It's about making sure that autonomy always has the use of AI always has someone ultimately in charge of that use. And I think that's very important. That's why I started this presentation today by looking at that extract from the AI policy of this challenger bank that has adopted AI. I haven't mentioned hallucinations. We're all very familiar with that. I think we need to, well, obviously, we need to be aware of them and be aware of the risk associated with them, which is why the human in the room point is so important. Okay. Definition: an LLM hallucination occurs when the model generates plausible sounding output that is factually incorrect and not grounded in the data it's received. Okay, that's hallucination. The model does not know when it's wrong. It has no access to inverted commas truth. Okay, only the grounding check does. So it has data and it acts on that in the way it's been programmed to do. And as far as it's concerned, that is the truth. It's not right or wrong. Okay. And the risk is that third bullet point. The risk is that hallucinated output looks very plausible. It's the same style. It's reported with the same confidence. There's no warning signal. It looks very plausible. Okay, but of course that's very similar to my 97% accuracy point. Okay, um, and here's an actual example that Andres put together. The forecasts are driven by Euribor change of Euribor of minus euro 25 million, a month-end settlement of 110 million, partially offset by wholesale inflows. Actually, the numbers were 85, 18, and 4. Okay. The error is invisible until cross-checked against the SHAP table. Now, I have no idea what SHAP means, but he means the real table, the actual data. Okay. In fact, let's make another of our edits. Okay. Actual values, that's all we need to know. Acronyms that aren't introduced are always a source of slight embarrassment. Right, okay. So we would have to check that and we wouldn't know it was wrong. It looks plausible, there's no reason to doubt it. But of course, in this example, a real example, it wasn't. Why hallucinations are especially dangerous in Treasury? Very good question. What's the nearest restaurant to Waterloo train station? And it turns out the restaurant, it tells me, is twice as far away as the nearest one. Not a problem. I'm just walking. Treasury, very big deal. A hallucinated 25 million Euribor error is going to change your hedging strategy or have P&L impact. Errors look confident and well formatted. That's the point earlier. They look plausible, and there's no verification. There's no source of truth. So therefore, we need the cross check. So let's just be aware of that at all times. Great, fantastic. I hope that has been of interest. Let's just get some final words done. Okay. I couldn't resist. It won't hallucinate because it's been trained on my books, unless there's some errors in my books. But I've not been told of any so far, mainly because they get proofread till I almost died. Right, okay. It's only trained on my books. Right, a governance starter kit. What to put in place? Actually, there is an edit I'd make to that, which is the policy. Okay. Andrea's saying start with steps 1 and 2, inventory, uh, obviously model risk management today. Regulators for some years now have policy and guidance on model risk management. AI would fall into that. Inventory, that's already covered. Second line sign off, that's already covered within existing guidance from regulators. Always have the owner, always have limits in place that you've already approved and don't exceed. Prompts, learn prompts, centralized prompts, have a repository, continuous iterative learning so we get the prompts accurate. Make sure we have, I mean, an AI hallucination or an AI error ultimately is an op risk or a model risk and an op risk. Non-AI fallback, keep a manual path for every critical treasury function. In other words, if the AI breaks down or is somehow found to be unsuitable, you've got some fallback to fulfill and complete that function. Okay. I would still start with a 0 in front of that actually, and that's AI policy. That's why I showed you my slide at the beginning, because I think before we start any of that, we want that policy in place so everyone understands how we're using AI, what it's going to be used for, how it's going to benefit the customer, and indeed our own balance sheet risk management, and also who's in charge, who's responsible, who's the accountable authority. So I'd actually start with a 0 as the AI policy. Right. I know one product design I would love a bank to offer. Maybe AI will enable it. Wouldn't it be great if, whether it was a personal loan, an overdraft facility, a car loan, a credit card, that you were applying for, the loan terms could meet your own personal circumstances? No, you could have a different rates could be step up or step down over time. You wouldn't have to pay every month or every quarter. You could vary the payment cycle. You could opt from fixed to floating rate at any time. Wouldn't it be great if the loan would just suit exactly what suited your personal profile? And it wasn't just a standard quarterly coupon, fixed rate, you pay this, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So wouldn't it be great if we could tailor a loan product to every single individual customer? And I think AI will enable that at some point. Fingers crossed, inshallah, right? What about customer interaction that moves with the customer life cycle? AI, when you are contracting with the bank and you're 18 to 30, your needs, your requirements are different to when you're 60, 70, 80. Okay. How about the customer interaction moves with that? So they're fine on the app when they're 25 or 30. They they wouldn't mind talking to a human being when they're older than that. But that's for another time. Okay, final word. We've restricted this conversation to banks and AI, and specifically bank, ALCO, and Treasury. Okay, the ask would appear to be, what is it? Remember what I said right at the start? Define your output, your outcome, your desired outcome, the business case, the benefits you're trying to achieve or wanting to achieve first. Okay, what is it you want to do more efficiently, differently, more cheaply, inverted commas, better in your current processes? Okay, low-hanging fruit, ALCO pack. I've written down there reg reporting, but time for another of my edits. With care. Why? Because if I get that one wrong, I'm looking at some serious consequences from the regulator. Um, Arcane subtleties associated with decision making and how best to manage Pillar 2 liquidity risk. I showed you my summary of PRA modernizing liquidity frameworks. Maybe we can use AI to understand our Pillar 2 liquidity better. Okay, the pipeline hedging timing I mentioned. Combination of all of these, or do you want to redesign it altogether? Imagine whole new outputs and processes as part of achieving a new higher goal. That sounds like some sort of utopian vision. Articulate your need first, what it is you want to improve, and then work backwards. Now, I finished this slide deck last Friday, and then I remembered an artist in that same Economist article. No, this is a different one. This is from an issue of The Economist in April by this fellow, Associate Professor at the Wharton School and the author of Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. Okay. Um, Leadership means that direction must come from the top. The CEO and other senior managers cannot delegate AI strategy to middle management or IT. Very true. Um, Firms that sand down AI's strange edges will veer towards automation and layoffs, as that is all they can see. Those willing to confront the technology head on can find something far more interesting, including ways to help make their people and their organizations capable of things that were impossible a year ago and will be impossible to predict a year from now. Nobody knows exactly where this is going, but you don't navigate strange territory by pretending your old maps will work. Really interesting article. Have a read of that when you get the slides, okay? I do like that bit in the second blue box that I've put round, the blue box I've drawn. Those willing to confront technology head on can find something far more interesting doing things that they wouldn't thought possible. I would love to see that tailor-made loan product for a customer or even small corporates. We don't have to fulfill just the standard T&C that all the customers do. How do you want to pay? Well, I'd like to have a payment holiday for the first month and then pay quarterly floating rate based on bank base rate and then move to fixed or vice versa. Or I'd like to be able to stop my payments for a month at a month's notice. Yeah, no problem. All these things you want, we'll build that for you. I'd love to see that. Okay, great. Thank you. There you go. There is the further reading. I will come out of that. I will stop sharing and I will hand back to my esteemed hosts. Thank you very much. Over back to you, UBA guys.
Thank you, Professor.
Very
Um,
welcome.
well done. Very insightful. We still have a bit more for you, a few questions in Q&A. You can see the applause yourself from the audience.
That's very kind. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
That
it
means a lot
speaks
to
for
me. Thank you.
itself. So, we're going on to the first one. With AI making treasury decisions faster and more data-driven, what do you believe will become the most valuable skill for treasury and risk professionals over the next 5 years that AI cannot easily replace?
Okay, good question. Actually, those skills are unchanged from today because ultimately, I've spoken a lot about the human in the room. Ultimately, that decision making, whether it's risk hedging or FX or intraday liquidity, that's still, I think, for time being, or even the next 5 years, but who can tell? That's the human. So the skill is the same. It's being able to understand the data, the output in front of you, and then making the decision. Now, that's no different to today. You get the ALCO pack, you understand your balance sheet position today. You're the one whatever your role is, you're attending ALCO and you're saying we need to do this or I recommend that. Okay. Um, Now that skill is unchanged. It's just that AI is giving you hopefully more accurate data, more up-to-date data, more quicker produced data. You're still interpreting it and making the decisions. The hedge example I use specifically because it's as much art as science. It's not a trading book. If when I do banking book risk exposure products like fixed rate lending, that hedge decision about notional amount, timing, how often I rebalance, how much I do or don't, how much I leave unhedged, that's still the human being. The AI is still giving you the data and making recommendations, but you're making the decision. So you still need to be able to interpret that. So I would say the skills for treasury risk professionals are the same. You still need to get up to speed on that. Now, I bet the follow-up question to be might be, yes, but if AI is doing all the junior stuff and the junior has just joined the bank 5 years from now, how is the junior going to get up to speed? Because the lot that they would have been doing as 25-year-olds is now being done by AI. Unfortunately and regrettably, I don't have the answer to that. I, I can't resist this. You'll have to keep reading my book, but I don't have the answer to that. If you learn by doing, practical experience is very important. Okay, that's what differentiates practitioners from, say, academic theory of banking, and that's a challenge. So, unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that, but you will still need the same skills you have today, interpreting data and making the decision.
Okay. Um, Questions piling up. We're looking at time, so forgive me for those that I might miss out, but let me just quickly go on to the next one. Do we have sites of back testing and how far back an AI model goes? I'm assuming that's AI when providing a model when forecasting. Do we have sight of back
Well,
testing? How far back? Yeah.
I mean, I mean, it depends the capability of your own architecture. I would have thought that the, I would have thought it's no different with an AI model than it is with the current model. You know, the models you're using, evaluate risk, you're back testing a VAR model. I don't know why you wouldn't back test the decisions of the output from an AI model as well. So the short answer to that would be yes, but I wouldn't. It may differ from bank to bank, but in theory, it should be yes.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. And next one, given that banking is more of a trust business, isn't trust deficits, isn't trust deficit the limiting factor in adopting AI in real life applications?
Well, it could well be absolutely. I mean, you remember the policy I showed you, the extract from that policy. We're adopting AI because we believe it will benefit the customer. Now, if we say that from the start and we demonstrate that, that is maintaining that trust. You're quite right. Banking is all confidence. It is a trust business. You lose confidence in the bank goes falls over. So in our policy, and if I mean words are easy, right? It's easy to say something. The hard part is actually doing it. If we say we're doing this for um, customer beneficial reasons, and here is how we're doing this, and we demonstrate that, then I think that shouldn't be a limiting factor. But we've got to actually do it. We've actually got to do what we say, but we've got to say it to start with. Talk is cheap. We've got to say it, and then we've got to demonstrate it. But that should maintain the trust, and it shouldn't limit adopting AI use if we're able to demonstrate that trust point.
Okay. Thank you. Next one is data leakage a risk of AI use or of the guardrails or domain employed by the bank?
Is data leakage a risk of AI use?
Yeah.
I mean, it I know. I mean, data leakage is a risk in all information technology. I use that word as a catch-all term in all solutions. So the short answer would have to be yes. I don't see why that risk goes away. The risk is still there because it's the same as adopting any other model, I would have
Okay.
thought.
Thank you. Another one for FX and hedging activities. Where do you see the biggest value from AI? Identifying exposures, recommending hedges, or executing trades?
Well, definitely the first two. I think there's a genuine value add for banks that have structural FX risk on their balance sheet to hedge in AI identifying exposure and recommending the solution. To me, like I said earlier, I'm not convinced on executing the trade. I, I don't think
I
that
quite
needs to be
agree with
automated.
you on that.
Yeah, I don't think that. I
It's a
don't.
human responsibility.
Yeah, I don't. I think there's genuine value from the identifying the risk, saying, listen, and then saying, here's how you can hedge it, or here's three options. That's great, and then I'll decide. But I wouldn't say the greatest value necessarily is executing the trade. I mean, these days, I mean, it's not always. I mean, my day was all pick up the phone. Now you're hitting a button and it does it on this online. I would leave that to the human at this point. I would still the value is the first two in your example, your correspondence
You make a loss, you
suggestions.
can't hold a robot responsible.
Yeah, that's true as well.
Okay. So next one, what is your view on the use of a statistical tool like SAS? I don't know, like SAS to automate processes as
Yeah,
compared to Gen
forgive
AI.
me. I wonder if your correspondent can just spell that out. I'm not familiar with that, so I don't
Yeah,
know the
I'm
answer
not
to
with
that.
SAS. So I'll leave that. The next one, if you were running a treasury function today and had a budget for only one AI initiative, what would you invest in first, and how would you measure success?
That's a great question. That's a great question. If I could just one use and I've got budget for just one, which one would I pick and how would I measure its success? I would veer between the ALCO pack. I wouldn't use it for reporting. I would veer between teaching and learning, so I can produce materials, horizon scanning. So teaching and learning, produce summaries that I can teach people with, or show, or even board members, and the ALCO pack and the summary dashboard. Or I would have it on that balance sheet hedging recommendations. Okay, they're both useful to me. Um, I might err on, and how would I measure success? Well, I mean, the hedging solution, I can measure success because look, my hedging's been really great the last 12 months since I did AI compared to the previous 12 months. Hedge effectiveness is actually an accounting requirement under hedge accounting. Hedge accounting requires you've got to demonstrate your hedge effectiveness. So, I mean, I think it's quite a shotgun approach. It's quite a scattergun inexact approach, but it's a requirement under hedge accounting rules. So we can measure effectiveness for hedging easily based on pre and post AI adoption. I might pick that, but I really like the idea of using it for teaching and learning and speedy alco pack generation, or indeed, if I've got a third option, which I can only pick one, speedy stress testing. Okay, there's three low-hanging fruits there, and if you can only pick one, I'm not sure which one I'd pick. I like all of them. Probably the Alco Pack one because that subject is dear to my own heart. I've seen so many. I've seen some good ones in my time, but I've seen so many bad ones. Probably that one I would go for. But they're three good but value-added lower hanging fruits.
Okay. Again, I would agree with you on the Alco Pack one from
Thank you, my friend.
experience.
You're a man after my own heart, Olawale.
Yes. Yeah, then another one, can AI predict liquidity gaps or funding shortages more accurately than traditional forecasting models?
That's a great question. I know some people who would say absolutely yes because of the way it's trained. At this stage, I would say theoretically yes, because ultimately it's still trained on historic data. Should I use a machine learning model to predict the liquidity gap, or the NMD behavior, or adopt an AI model and ask it? I know a lot of people who say to me theoretically the latter. I'm probably not the person to ask that question. Actually, I would agree that theoretically it should predict it more accurately. But at this stage today, I'm not 100% on that. Forgive me.
Okay,
Great question, whoever's asked that. Great question.
thank you. Someone has thrown one of the poll questions back, sort of. But let me read it to you.
It's not my fault.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to deploying AI in ALM today? Data quality, integration with core banking slash treasury systems, model explainability, or regulatory compliance, and how are leading banks overcoming this challenge?
It's probably a bit of all of them. I don't think it's regulatory compliance is an obstacle. I think if you can demonstrate when you go to the regulator, we're adopting this and we're doing this, and here's how we're using it, and you show them all the data, the documents they want, I think they'll be fine with it. In theory, at least, you convince them that it's good governance and good output, and you've got a policy around it that's robust. I don't see regulatory compliance as an obstacle, but I think all of the others, to an extent, are obstacles. Now, did the chap at the end? Did the person say how are banks overcoming this challenge? Did I hear
Yes,
that right? Yeah, you
yes.
saw that extract from that Wharton professor that I showed the article at the end. Uh, the thing I put the blue box around, that's the answer to that question. Banks are getting around this obstacle by having not leaving AI adoption to oh, the head of IT or a particular individual or department. All relevant stakeholders need to be in the room to say, right, what are we doing for AI? How should we adopt it? And to me, the relevant stakeholders are all members of the ALCO. Okay, with the head of IT or the CTO and the CISO as well, the CISO and the CTO in the room with ALCO. They're all in the room to address all these questions. That's how we overcome it. Okay, we overcome it most effectively. We overcome all these challenges most effectively if all the relevant stakeholders in the room, as opposed to just one particular department or a handful of people.
Next one, how can banks balance AI adoption in Treasury with model risk and regulatory expectations?
At this stage, that's a great question. At this stage, I would say by just treating it as another model. At this stage, did he say model? Did he or she say model risk and reg expectations?
Yes.
Yeah. We already have model risk guidance from regulators, from the ECB, from Basel, from the PRA, so we can follow that guidance. So we just adopt the same guide. We just follow that same guidance for an AI model. Reg expectations. I'm not a regulator, but I would say that would suit them. If we have the same guidance, we follow the same guidance for general model risk management and model governance and model validation for the AI model, that should probably cover off the regulatory expectation as well. But we follow the same model risk management guidance that we already are following. Now, I know that not every regulator, I know your correspondents are all around the world. I know that people are dialing in from all around the world. So I don't know what regulatory jurisdiction they're in, but and I know that not every regulator um, has published guidance on it. But what I would do if I was a bank that where the regulator hadn't published guidance, I'd go to the PRA's website. They've published two policy statements on model risk management and model risk governance, one in 2018 and one in 2023. I would I would go to that, I would download that, and I would just follow that. And if we include the AI model within that guidance, we should be okay with our regulator.
Okay. Thanks, Professor. Do you see AI evolving from decision support to autonomous decision making in Treasury?
Well, that's the theory, but that's where we got to just hold back a bit and see how it goes. It could well happen. It may well happen. You and I have already decided that we'd rather not at this stage. There's enough, to me, there's enough benefit that we can take. I've shown the low-hanging fruit in the slides. And I mean, I would welcome any comments. If any of your correspondents have comments on the slides, feel free. They can send them to you, and you guys can forward them to me. I'll keep the dialogue going. So I should just say now, if you have any further questions, send them to UBA UK. They'll send them to me, and I'll respond back via UBA UK. I'm happy to do that. But at this stage, I would say there's enough value add we can get using Gen AI and all those low-hanging fruit without us having to worry about making it an autonomous execution agent. To me, that's not a problem that needs fixing at this stage, so I wouldn't go down there personally.
Professor, lots of good words for you and kudos. I'll have to skip that for time. This person has
Okay.
three questions, but he said a lot of kind words to you, just to
That's
let
very
you.
that's very kind. Thank you. Whoever
Okay.
you are, appreciate that. Thank you. It
All
means a
right.
lot to me. And I meant what I said. If any of your correspondents here have any follow-up questions, they can email them to you and Valerie, send them to
Okay.
me. I'll send them back to you. You can forward them back
Okay.
to them. No problem
Yeah,
at
I'm
all.
sure we won't be able to take all because they are piling up. Let me just go on to it.
Okay,
So,
no problem.
first one, as banks deploy AI for ALM and balance sheet decisions, how do we prevent the loss of tacit treasury judgment, the kind built through crises like 2008, when experienced staff retire, especially when succession pipelines are thin, as in many African
Yeah,
banks?
that's well, not just that. Did you just say many African countries at the end? Yeah,
Yes,
I don't think it's
African
limited.
banks.
Yeah, I don't think it's limited to African banks. That's a problem, global problem. It's very similar to the question about what skills do I need to still be valuable as a treasury or risk person in 5 years' time. And the challenge there is building up the skills before you get to that level of ALCO member, treasurer, CRO, CFO, head of ALM, head of balance sheet management. I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that. I said I would at this stage, whether you're a bank in Europe, Africa, Middle East, anywhere, Asia, what have you, at this stage we can adopt it efficiently for things like ALCO pack production and summarizing regulatory policy statements, and still teach our juniors through working on the job. If we start using it for more and more processes, that learning won't happen because they're not doing it. So I don't have the solution to that. Maybe that's a reason for not adopting it wholesale across every process, because like your correspondent just said, when people succession planning, right? People retire. The person who's replacing him or her needs to be as skilled and learn on the job, whether it's 2008, 2023, 2020, all those crisis events. They're not going to learn if they're not doing some of that themselves. So maybe that's a reason. I'm just putting this out for people to think about at their own bank. Maybe that's a reason for adopting it where there is low-hanging fruit, but not to do every process, because we're not going to be able to teach our people. Now, this is, I think, is a big deal. That someone could say, but listen, we can employ a lot less people and make much more P&L and return on capital, precisely because instead of needing a risk and treasury and finance function of 100 people in a bank that had 1,000 staff, I can just have 10 people. Yeah, absolutely, you can. But guess what? Those 10 people won't know what your current 10 know, because they wouldn't have trained on anything that the current 10 have done. So you go fast forward 10 years, you might think you need 10 people, but you still need someone to do decision making. So this is a challenge. I don't have a solution for it, but it might be a reason for adopting the low-hanging fruit for the time being and not all the processes. I'm just noticing that we are past time, so I don't know how many more
Yes.
you want to do, but
Let's I'll finish for this person and then maybe we'll take one more.
okay.
Okay.
I'm in no hurry, my friend.
Okay. All right. So where do you see AI's biggest blind spot in balance sheet management? Is it in modeling the numbers or capturing the unwritten judgment senior treasurers
Well,
apply during stress events?
it's certainly the second one. Obviously, I don't think modeling, if input, we said earlier in one of the slides about correct input data, um, I don't see any technical or theoretical problem with crunching the numbers, getting the input, looking at the balance sheet and putting the output. But in terms of applying judgment, when there's a stress event, I, I personally see AI struggling to replicate that, because again, every crisis is different. All the past data is used to train a model, and a new crisis comes along and the model would have no experience of it. Whereas a human being has got judgment to apply, not because they've seen that new stress event, it's a new one, but they've known how to respond based on previous stress events and previous market events. So they'll apply some judgment. And that's harder for an AI model to adopt. So I don't know. I would say that's a bigger issue with AI adoption, especially when AI is being used to make decisions. That, I think the expression, what was the expression your correspondent said? Blind spot. That's a blind spot.
All right. We'll take one last one, Professor. There's
Sure.
15 to go. So yeah. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, which treasury roles or processes do you believe will be transformed the most by AI, and which will continue to require significant human judgment?
Uh, well, I think the slides inferred some to the first question, which processes will be transformed the most. I think it's the things like horizon scanning, output of risk packs, teaching and learning, which will continue. For me personally, I'm about to use the word unfortunately. Unfortunately, I think the continuation of significant human judgment are what senior execs currently do. Roles undertaken by those 1 or 2 level or 3 or 4 levels below senior exec board and ALCO members are the ones that are most open to being transformed by AI. So they go away. But that then brings the challenge that we were just discussing. How do I train someone who isn't currently a senior? But I think the current straightforward processes, modeling your NMD, your non-maturing deposits, producing the ALCO pack, producing the training slides, straightforward processes. They're the ones that will go first, because they're the ones that can be automated or AI-ified the easiest.
Okay, so we're going to collate the other questions and maybe share via email because, like I
No
said, there's
problem.
so many. So,
No problem at all, sir.
okay. So at this point, just to thank you again
You're very welcome.
immensely. The crowd have done, the listeners. So I'm thanking you again for a
Thank you.
highly insightful session, and
Very welcome.
everyone who's joined us as well and contributed through the polls and questions. It's been so well attended. We appreciate. And
No,
as the final notes, please, kindly complete the short feedback survey. As you leave, the first 3 participants to submit the survey will receive a copy of Professor Moorad Choudhry's book. Thank you again. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
everyone.
And it's very nice to see the claps, but it's very nice to see the hearts.
Yes.
That's even more emotional for me. Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you to
you.
UBA UK. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.